of course, if you're building those relationships with people, then it's much more likely that that impact is sustained over time. The people, the farmers or the people you're working with are going to want to, they're going to be invested in your relationship also as much as you're in theirs. So that's a really important point, actually.
Welcome to Carbon Conversations, a podcast by Biochar Life, where we explore the cutting edge of environmental solutions. From biochar to smart agriculture to the climate tech revolution, we sit down with experts and business leaders at the forefront of change. This is your host, Matt Rickard. Hey, Nathan, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good to be here.
Cool.
I'm well. Yeah.
Cool. Cheers for staying on late. I know it's early for me, late for you, but perhaps a good entry point, maybe a bit of background. We know each other, obviously, dealing with each other for a few months now, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff you've been doing with us. But a little bit of background to yourself, Chorus, ground up investing would be great.
Sure. So I'm the Senior Director of Finance for Ground Up Investing, which is the impact investing arm of Chorus International. Chorus is an international nonprofit focus on health and humanity services, kind of all around the world, but we have programs right now in largely Latin America, Africa, and a company that we also own in the UK. We're doing some humanitarian work also in places like Ukraine currently. So that's Chorus. Ground Up is impact investing arm. Like I said, we started about 2017 in Africa with coffee, and since have expanded to include kind of cacao, spices, and related kind of small farmer work that focuses on kind of the rural agriculture and sustainability.
Cool. I think something good for our audience, sometimes we talk about some of the terms we use every day, and often I take it for granted that people just know stuff. It'd be great if you can, define the impact investment space, for the audience's point of view, and what role does it play in terms of advancing kind of social and environmental impact?
Sure. Yeah. So impact investing, the investing part, obviously people are more familiar with. You have what we might qualify as venture capital or private equity, kind of the more illiquid assets. And we're focused on that kind of area, but the impact part is really more specific. It has to do with kind of general or more general goals for the fund over and above financial returns. So specifically, some themes for impact include like poverty, economic growth, or work with certain communities, reduction of inequality, responsible consumption. So sub-themes, and that's really what the impact universe is all about. Here at Ground Up, we focus again on the rural economy and bringing basically sustainability to some of those places where it's really hard to get to. In Africa and Latin America, basically wherever Chorus is stationed, we have entry points.
Cool, makes sense. And probably a good segue. I know, you recently visited some of our sites in East Africa. You and I have chatted since, but not properly spoken about it. Ground Up Investing obviously made an investment into Biochar Life, and as part of that, yourself, other teams have been down there. Yeah, what are some of talk to us a bit about that trip. How was it visiting the sites in East Africa? I don't know if you've been before actually, or if that was a first, but yeah, what was it like? What are some of the challenges you kind of see down there, both with the work we're doing and more broadly, and the opportunities around there, and some of the highlights of that trip?
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot there, of course. I've been to Africa, and this is my third time to the East Africa specifically. Previously, I was working out of the DRC,
Yep.
And I visited our coffee, Mountain Harvest, our coffee company in Uganda. So first time in Kenya though. It was incredibly pleasant. Long flight, about 25 hours from DC.
Whoa. Okay, that is a long flight.
So it took some time. I mean, it was really fascinating to be on the ground with Biochar Life and seeing your operations, seeing what farmers are doing. And like you mentioned, the challenges. I
Mm,
mean, it's such a large area and it's very hard to get there, and a lot of the communities don't have very good access. So I think certainly transportation, kind of coordinating logistical aspects is like a large part of the story. And then the other, of course, Africa has a complex um, legislative kind of climate. Every country has a large history that's often fraught with challenges, and Kenya's not you know alone in that, and certainly not um, in avoidance of those kind of issues either. So
mm,
like dealing with the local government, making sure that you have everything in place to be able to go into those communities successfully, and not get shut down, not make sure everything runs well, I think is always kind of a moving target and a challenge in the area for sure. But I mean, the other side of things, of course, being the opportunities, right? And I think the opportunity to affect great change,
mm,
because it's so difficult to access those places, because those people have so little in some of those communities, bringing improvements in their yield even, or improvements in their income, or a combination of all of those things can have a dramatic impact. And talking with farmers there was quite revelatory, just having these conversations. They were always very honest, and honestly very thankful for what had been given to them in terms of training and the biochar and all of that. So it was great to see. Yeah.
Well, what have you found just in terms of your, having visited different parts of Africa? And Africa is a massive continent. It's funny.
Yeah.
I think it's not like I didn't know that, but having dealt a lot more with various countries in Africa and having looked at, flying from here to there, and you just you don't really realize how big the space is. But in terms of the differences in culture, both on a ground level and from a governmental level, are there differences? Are you finding when you go into different countries, it's like, there are similarities, or are you dealing with different barriers, different challenges when you go to these different countries within Africa?
It's interesting. We had some really good conversations with people also from West Africa who were part of the excursion, and of course, you know, uh, having visited a few countries in East Africa, but it seems like it there's a lot of similarity, I would say, across the way some things are done,
Mm,
which I found surprising. I would have expected, like you say, it's a massive continent, but I think some of the challenges, especially in governments and in dealing with how to go about setting up systems of payment, how to set up systems of distribution, or like logistics. In Because I think a lot of Africa was affected similarly, through colonial rule and things like that. There are similarities that you can see across countries, and to a large effect, the people ruling the countries or in charge of the countries act similarly in
mm,
many cases. Yeah, but for sure, Uganda is different than Congo. Congo is different than Kenya, and remarkable differences in terms of like how people go about daily living, kind of some cultural attitudes, I think, which I found really interesting. Um, I will say Kenyans are a very positive bunch overall. I sensed a lot of it's just a different kind of outlook
mm.
of living, and maybe it has to do with the Maasai and the great open spaces that they have there with the beautiful animals and everything else. It's incredible. Beautiful country.
Yeah, cool. That, I mean, on that, just at the, when you talk about the community level, I mean, something we've always led with. I mean, everything we do is about the community essentially. Although we're an environmental business, we are very people focused, and I think you know that. And of course, obviously, a lot of the approaches you guys have are about that kind of community aspect. I mean, how do Ground Up and Chorus, how important do you view that kind of the community being central to projects, and also how do you evaluate that and ensure that is maintained as you grow different projects throughout countries,
Yeah.
Africa and elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I mentioned so impact funds, they usually have a central mandate. And ours really is to improve rural economies and work with local communities to build businesses kind of sustainably. That I would say is the primary focus of ground up investing. And Chorus as a whole, we focus on the community level. It's all about the individual, um, relationships that we build. And then we do that over and over and over
Mm.
again. And that it's impact, but it's not saying we're throwing, say, $1 million at a problem and just, having someone else like deal with the details. We're in the details,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of the way the company focuses. And I think, that's where Ground Up specifically aligns quite well with Biochar Life. I observed this, every farmer has a relationship, and every one of those relationships is cultivated and encouraged and maintained. Um, and it's a high touch kind of business, but it's incredibly meaningful, and I think has the potential to change like the whole rural landscape in some of these areas, given time, right? And of course, if you're building those relationships with people, then it's much more likely that that impact is sustained over time.
Mm.
The people, the farmers or the people you're working with are going to want to they're going to be invested in your relationship also as much as you're in theirs. So that's a really important point, actually.
Yeah, I think yeah, having done a fair bit in the non-profit space over the years, and then also in the, well, we're a social enterprise as such, and that very much is what the impact investment model is, right? If I make an investment into an impact investment, there is a return. And I do wonder whether the fact there is a business model around this work as opposed to just money being pledged to get a job done, I wonder whether that really kind of aids that mission of having everyone involved, because the kind of business centric model, yes, it's about impact, but there has to be a return for us to be
Hmm.
successful and continue with this work. I wonder whether that really kind of aids that engagement model in a way.
Yeah, well, and I think that's you hit it on the head. There's a big difference between impact investing. We always have to differentiate between impact investing and development work.
Mm.
All right. Obviously, there's a relationship in terms of the communities we're working with, but development or a project might be implemented over the course of a year or 3 years, and then afterwards there may be something left over, but most of the activity is gone and it goes elsewhere unless the project is re-implemented. Whereas we're establishing, like I said, relationships and systems and businesses that hopefully will thrive, right? It's in
Mm.
everyone's best interest for them to thrive. Therefore, they're not going anywhere, right? And that actual impact is then over the course of hopefully a decade or more as the business grows. So I think that is what I get excited about, because I think about, you know, um, implementing a project versus actually investing in people and in
Mm.
building something. And you're really changing, like we said earlier, you're changing the landscape potentially. You have the potential to really have a great effect.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important because the hope is really that when you're not there, whatever you're doing continues in some way.
Right.
You're implementing a system that will be self-sustaining, right? That's the whole kind of point. So, and on that, I wanted to ask about, I mean, the kind of measurement and reporting of a lot of this work. There's been a rightfully so. There's been a much stronger focus in the last decade, I'd say, and maybe longer, but on how transparent the measurement of social environmental impact around these types of projects is. And I know to your investors, there is that kind of call to action to be able to show that. How to ground up investing? How do you handle that? How do you assess social environmental impact? Is it just a lot of reporting? And what are the kind of things investors expect, and how do you meet those expectations?
Yeah. Pardon me. So I think we focus on what you can reliably assess, and what what certainly what people expect, but my focus certainly in finance is the data, right?
Mm.
So our metrics right now are like number of farmers, the amount we pay to farmers, or the amount we contribute to an economy. We can show that directly. Things like soil health improvements in yield, in the number of hectares of land that are in the work we're doing. We can show that, we can quantify these things. So I think it's true that impact work and this kind of borderline business is it a business is not a business work gets a bad rep, because and justifiably, there's been a fair amount of bad data,
Mm.
and reporting has maybe not been as rigorous as it should be. So one of my goals, and certainly ground up's goals, is to report on that which is accurate and is well defined, and also something that we can get with some kind of frequency. So we're not making up numbers. Our numbers might not be as specific as some other places right now, but it's a function of quality, and that's what we aim to. And I think obviously, when I was looking at the work that Biochar Life is doing, for example, the verifiers, the monitors, all of that work that goes into um, working with the farmers and the land and everything, and there are a lot of reporting tools that you've developed, and it seems like a good amount of rigor, and that to me is hopeful.
Yeah, and I should clarify, I'm asking you that question, but essentially ground up investing has made an investment in us. So it's it's also our responsibility to be doing that for you guys. But I also
Right.
think there's a kind of holistic approach within this sector, right? Where we're all trying to report back kind of to the world in terms of what we're doing and the impact it's having. So, yeah, what are some of the challenges from an impact investing point of view, particularly in emerging markets? What are the kind of bigger challenges you face, and how do you address these challenges?
Yeah. So many, right? It's yeah, I mean, everything from regulatory issues, like I kind of was alluding to earlier, especially when you have governments that are less stable.
Yeah.
You How do you set up an investment that where you can kind of guarantee that your money's not just going to get taken, or where the investment is not just going to get appropriated. uh, I mean, that's one. Obviously then you have, like, within that you have access to market, size of market. Often you're dealing with very small marketplaces, very specific ideas, like carbon credits, for example. Carbon credits in Kenya.
Hmm.
It's a burgeoning market, but I mean, not a very large one. And it's a challenge, right, to be a market maker in some cases, or to be part of the development. For example, Mountain Harvest in Uganda, they spearheaded largely the development of specialty coffee, which is not known in Uganda. It's becoming better known, and they've been building their kind of consortium of coffee growers to really boost quality, to get the name out, to go to international competitions.
Hmm.
So that's a real challenge. And I think that the last thing is, as an investor, how the heck do you find companies to invest in some of these really challenging environments?
Yeah.
You still want to represent like I said, sustainability at the very least, and often some kind of financial return. And so it can be very challenging. You're dealing with maybe a pipeline of 100 that you siphon down to two possibilities, and then those two possibilities take a year to implement just because of the other things we mentioned. So that, that's the challenge. And of course, for us, we're lucky because we are part of the larger chorus group, right? The team, and that spans dozens of countries around the world. And so that can help with the pipeline. That you really want to have those boots on the ground, as it were, the team already in place, incredibly helpful in challenging environments, and to do due diligence and to
Yeah.
build trust and all of those things that you need to have a successful investment. So
I'm sure, I know you guys, I mean, obviously we have teams on the ground there. You do as well. I mean, I think almost impossible to kind of do this work without having kind of teams in place in these areas, right? I mean, is that something that's important? And also, what do you see evolving in this space over the next kind of decade? What are some of the things you see hopefully making it easier, and how do you see it evolving?
yeah, you absolutely need a team. It doesn't have to be there. Of course, it's incredibly helpful if it is.
Hmm.
You need to, I mean, if not, though, then you're going to need to spend a week, a couple weeks, a month to do due diligence. You need someone there. Yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of things you can do Zoom these days. Maybe fortunately, actually, you need to go in person to talk with people. And I think that's definitely, in this case, a blessing, because you go and you experience everything that we've talked about in another culture, another area of the world. And then of course you're with a purpose of talking with entrepreneurs, learning about their lives, learning about the kind of the climate. You need to be there on the ground to get a feel for that. So I
Yeah.
mean, you mentioned the evolution, and I mean, I think more and more the world is in a state where this kind of investment is very important, um, especially in the environment, especially in carbon markets. We need innovative solutions to solve the most challenging problems. I was reading an article, I think it was in the New York Times, talking about carbon capture and ExxonMobil setting up a carbon capture facility, and they pointed out, someone pointed out, said that's fine, but they're using that so that they can push, their petroleum, basically the oil out of the ground in a bigger rate, because they're fixing carbon into the bedrock, and somehow it's managing to like get oil out to extract it in a from a deeper location. And it's like, is that really beneficial? And like there are some things like that really raise your eyebrow, and makes you think, well, yeah, we need to actually build innovative solutions that make sense, right? And I think it takes, to bring it back, it takes like an impact framework really to do that, because you're not only solely profit oriented, right? And that makes a difference, because you have another goal, whether it is the environment, or whether it's small, whether it's rural economies like we're focused on. So I think in that vein, like more and more with the environment and I guess increased pressures of globalization, although that's been kind of the thing for the last 200 years, really. But increased pressures of globalization, it'll be more and more important to kind of carve out these little pockets for people to thrive in. And yeah, that's kind of what we're here to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think there's no shortage of innovation and ideas right now, which is great. And I've had a couple of podcasts recently with people working with or related to climate tech investment. And I think some of the difference I'm seeing as I speak to more of these people, it's great to see all these ideas, but I think when you're coming from a development background, you're coming in with a different lens than when you're coming from a kind of traditional often tech startup mentality, and that's meaning that, yeah, there's some great ideas there, but not all of them are necessarily putting, solving the world's problem at the forefront. The profitability piece, which honestly is important because it drives
Yeah.
business forward. But I think there's an order of things that here, in terms of finding the right social enterprises that are both going to be sustainable economically and also have the relevant and the correct, social and environmental impact with what they do.
Right, there's a balance, and then the interesting thing, of course, is that now increasingly, especially in Europe and other, but they're including legislation that captures the environmental impact, right? And that's actually bringing it to your balance sheet and to your profitability.
Yeah.
So, kind of in an ironic twist, that's now becoming part of the picture for all companies. And it should be, right. It should have been 20 years ago, maybe, it could be argued. Maybe we wouldn't be in such a pickle now, but so hopefully we're innovators kind of in that front.
Indeed.
And that, yeah. And I mean, and then we have to work with the tech companies. We have to work with the people that are creating innovative solutions. And including everyone in that conversation is very important.
Indeed, I agree. Yeah, I think there's room for everyone. It's about putting the right ones at the front. So, I mean, on that note as well, what advice would you give to social enterprises like ourselves that are looking for investment? What does Ground Up look for, and what advice would you give to social enterprises out there trying to kind of raise the capital to shift their mission forward?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think obviously the most important thing is a clear vision of what their business is. We want to see businesses that know or have a good idea of where they're going and have a basic track record to support that. A year or two of trials and tribulations goes a long way to kind of helping to define your vision too, for that matter. So those two things, and I think obviously you want to make sure that your team has everyone that's needed to succeed in the business. All too often, you'll have a business that's maybe only science oriented, and you haven't considered the financial structures required, or you have a person that's just interested in raising capital but doesn't really have a good vision for the actual work. So it's the combination of that. And finally, I would say, it's really important that innovators in the area and that entrepreneurs look at diversifying their pitch. No, obviously, no
Mm.
one fund is the answer. So if you're coming and you're asking for everything from one person, that it's problematic both for the person who wants to give you the money, but also for you as an entrepreneur. Yeah, and so communicating kind of your diversification efforts when you're making a pitch or when you're on a call, I think it's not detrimental. It's actually really important. It's a kind of counterintuitive maybe, but
Yeah, it is. It's not something I hadn't thought about it. It's good advice, and I hadn't really thought about it because it is, I think, quite specific to the question asked, which is around social enterprises and impact investment specifically, right? So, yeah. I'll end on a bit of a personal note. Obviously, I did a bit of research on you, as you do. We know each other professionally, but
sure.
I couldn't help but come across this, and I'll have to read it because it was a quote. I think that you have a gorgeous tenor voice. I think I read it in Broadway World. So this is obviously your
Yeah.
extracurricular stuff. But give us a bit of insight. Becoming a tenor. What's that all about? How did you get into it? I'm not going to put you on the spot and get you to sing, but if you want to, please
That's
do.
fine. No, this mic might overload. It's just how it is. But it's funny, and people always say that, and they're like, "Oh, you could just." Yes, but it's best to hear it about 10 to 15 feet away. It's kind of the sweet spots, like even maybe farther out in the hall, and that's the goal. So, I mean, I started when I was young. My parents were both classical musicians. I started on the violin when I was like 4, and singing in choirs, and I started singing opera even when I was like 9 or 10. And then took a big break because I decided that I wanted to, get more into business and finance. And I came back to it a little later in life, but then went and studied. And actually, it's what brought me to the U.S. I studied at NYU for my master's in New York, obviously, and stayed there for a few years. And I mean, it's been quite the journey. As any singer would, or any musician probably would tell you, it's never straight up or straight down. It kind of goes around in circles sometimes, and then you end up getting to where ultimately I think where you're comfortable. And for me, I'm singing right now with the Washington National Opera. I sing kind of up and down the eastern seaboard in various communities. I sang in Boston, obviously New York. I don't actually get back to Canada very much, which is interesting. But yeah, I really, I think doing both is, for me, is helpful. Well, obviously, so the finance is interesting, and the work we're doing is meaningful, and it kind of sustains the music side of things, which keeps my mind nimble in turn. So
Yeah.
I like to say they're complementary in a very strange way. Yeah.
Well, I think, however fulfilling your work is, I think we all need some sort of, breakaway. So, and this sounds certainly like a meaningful one in parallel to the work. So yeah, awesome. I'll look forward to, I haven't heard any of your tenor tones yet, but I shall, yeah, if you've got anything, please share, and yeah, I can always stick links in the podcast. So
Sure. Yeah, I have a website and things. Yep.
cool. I didn't have any other questions. If there isn't anything I didn't ask, then please feel free to share, or else, where can people get in touch with you, learn more about yourself, Ground Up, Chorus? I'll also leave those notes in the speaker notes.
Sure, that sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to get in touch is through our website, just groundupinvesting.com. And is that our website? Anyway, you can double check that.
I'll check it. I'll put the link for anyone listening or watching. I'll put a link in the
Sure.
in the
And we
notes.
have an info email there. So if you'd like to get in touch, we're always happy to field questions, or look at your businesses. Certainly, we're right now, Ground Up Investing we're in a fundraising phase for the company. So we're looking both at funders as well as pipeline. So anywhere in the world, but with a focus specifically in Latin America and Africa.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, Nathan. Thanks for jumping on. It's been great. Really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, let's do this again sometime. So
that sounds great. Thanks so much, Matt. Enjoy your morning.
Cheers. Enjoy your evening.